Let's go now to Rick Crawford. He is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, so he knows a thing or two about all this. All right, Mr. Chairman, the president's negotiating position depends a great deal on the current condition of Iran's military. There are some competing narratives here. The White House says that Iran has been decimated. Take a listen.
The Navy is gone, their Air Force is gone, everything's gone, and they're negotiating on fumes.
We've already decimated their conventional military, and we're in a position where we could substantially set back their nuclear program.
They are at the end of their tether now financially.
All right, so Iran predictably is going to counter with bluster of its own and say that they're a great power. But when we look at U.S. and allied intelligence reports, leaked and selective as those may be, we do get a picture of a potentially dangerous foe that retained about 70% of its pre-war missile stockpile, may have restored access to 30 of its 33 missile sites along the Strait of Hormuz, new weapons maybe from Russia and China. What's a clear-eyed view of what Iran can and cannot do at this point?
Well, I think the clear-eyed view is listening to the president, who has access to more information probably than anybody does. And there may be some individuals who take great delight in undermining the president through leaks. I would just encourage them to really join the team here, get with Team America, and come in on our side instead of trying to support the Iranian narrative. The reality is the president is the first president in my lifetime, despite my complete respect and admiration for Ronald Reagan, he didn't finish the job. I was there during that time, and he could have finished the job, and he didn't. President Trump is not going to make that mistake. He is finishing the job. He's given them a diplomatic route that would be safer for everybody involved, but he's prepared to back that up if they choose not to take the diplomatic route. And I think he should be given a whole lot of credit for the diplomatic effort he's engaged in and the coalition of support he's building among allies in the region.
Okay, some of the people who sound a lot like you when they talk about finishing the job and who have been supportive of the war effort generally, I think here about people like Senators Roger Wicker or Ted Cruz, they have expressed caution and concern that the deal the president may be making is a bad deal. Big issues include money for Tehran, the status of Iran's nuclear stockpiles, and most of all, any kind of acknowledgement that the Iranians have control of the Strait of Hormuz. Where are you on the deal as you have seen it so far? Are you sold yet?
Well, one of the things that I think is important to note that none of these things happen without those red line conditions being met. And I think that's really what's going to make the difference for the president. We talked about the control of the strait. Well, look, the strait is under the United States control right now for all intent and purpose. And even if it weren't, there still has to be a recognition that Iran doesn't have sovereign control over the Strait of Hormuz. They have sovereign control 12 miles out from their coast, but Oman has a sovereign claim to the Strait of Hormuz, as does the Emirates. And so to just dismiss that as though they're the only power in the equation is flat out wrong. The president is holding them to that. He's making sure that the strait is secure. As far as their nuclear dust, as the president calls it, we have gone into other countries like Libya and secured their fissile material and dismantled their capabilities. We can do it again. And so the status of their military, they're the weakest they've ever been probably in history, but certainly in the last decade or so. And so I think the conditions are right now for this deal. And I think the president can either strike a deal or he can deal a strike. But either way, this is an historic point in our history.
Okay, so just take us up to the 30,000-foot level. How will you judge, what will be your standard, Mr. Chairman, for whether this conflict ends up having been worth its cost, the cost in lives and resources and for American consumers and all of that stuff? What's your win look like where you can say this has been worthwhile?
Well, I mean, look, the reality is for 47 years, this country has been taking the world hostage in various ways at various times throughout that period. The president said enough is enough. And they were dangerously close to a nuclear weapon. What we know about Iran is the point at which they could deliver a strike, which was demonstrated in their ability to, say, for example, range Diego Garcia. All they'd have to do is reverse that course 180 degrees, and they could range Barcelona or Paris or Madrid or any number of Russian or European cities and possibly even some Russian targets. We don't know. But the point being that we have to stop that, because they had taken a page out of the North Korean book. They were holding the region hostage with their ability to deliver ballistic missiles at range so that they could continue to develop a nuclear weapon. Why does an oil-rich country like Iran want to enrich uranium to weapons grade, if not to use it for military applications? And the answer is that's why they wanted to use it for military purposes. They wanted to become a nuclear superpower militarily. The president said, nope, you're not going to do that, and he has stopped it. He's done more than any other president to stop that mission that the Iranians were on and secure the region.
Okay, so that argument is persuasive to many in your conference, but House Republicans do seem like they have a war powers problem here. The Senate advanced for the first time its own bill, and Speaker Johnson then tabled a House version that looked like it was going to pass if it had come to the floor. We noted when Appropriations Chairman Tom Cole said that the military is basically going to run out of funding for the conflict by August if there isn't a defense supplemental. How are you guys going to unstick this wicket? It seems like there's a collision course here.
Yeah, I mean, appropriations is another consideration. Obviously, that has to be done based on the authorities that are given, and so that's going to be something that is wrestled with. But the War Powers Act is flawed in and of itself. So I think if we're going to address the president's authorities, we need to start probably create another War Powers Act from whole cloth that does not impede his ability to continue to do what's necessary to defend this nation. Not just in the context of what he's doing with Iran, but even beyond that with other engagements that may arise as circumstances dictate. We can't hobble the president and make it difficult for him to defend this nation.
All right, America, if you were from Vaucluse, Arkansas, you would know him already, but if you don't, there he is, Chairman Rick Crawford. We thank you for your time. All right, let's go out.